Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a lovely city and a really wonderful place, probably the loveliest that I ever had a presentation in. And hello, folks up there. You get the rare opportunity to see me talking from that perspective. It doesn't happen very often. So, yeah, I will pretty much continue to build on the nice presentation that Anna gave you. I will talk about designing intangible stuff, and I will talk about failing and learning. I had this profession of being called a service designer for about 6-7 years now, and still sometimes when I think about my daily work, I wonder whether we can actually design the services, because there are so loose structures and the material is so different compared to many other things that people design. But the agency that I come from, Palmu, is now 4 years old, and I guess we're by far the biggest service design agency in Finland, already about 50 people, which is quite a lot to manage already. We do pretty much everything connected to developing and innovating new services, whether it's designing for better customer experiences, reorganizing the service production and delivery, or developing service strategy. And I think it's really booming for us, because what we see that is happening both in the private and public sector is that all development that is done is somehow connected to services. So you can say that pretty much all the business in the future is service business anyway. So there's lots of work to be done. And usually when I introduce the company, I like to point out the different backgrounds that people come from. And I think that's the only way to really do service design. So besides having designers, we have primary school teachers, we have psychologists, sociologists, people who come from marketing, really technical backgrounds and so on. And that's the interesting mix that makes the approach that we think that is needed when organizations develop their services and service business. So what does service design agency actually do? I think pretty much everything we do, it somehow connects to this. So both private and public organizations are facing a situation nowadays that they have less and less resources available, and at the same time, if they want to, if they want to find a competitive advantage, then they need to be able to create more value with less resources. So there's two simultaneous need. You need to design for better customer experience, and at the same time, you need to rethink and reorganize your structures of service delivery and the way you innovate and develop your service production. A friend of mine who's a professor in future studies, he showed me this. I didn't first understand at all what was it about, but supposed to be some kind of proof why this service design is needed. So, and it's a proof that the shift already happened 10 years ago. So that the figure there is the average price of the most common commodities and resources. And as we can see, for all the other price changes, there's been an explanation. But now the only explanation is that basically we are running out of resources. And we are entering from the era of production efficiency to the era of customer experience and creating more value in customer experience with less resources. And companies and organizations are really having a hard time to adapt to this change. And I think my hometown in Finland is Nokia, where the mobile phones originally come from, and this is an example of the company that it's really having a hard time to adapt to this change. They had the ability to make more products to the market at the cheapest cost. They have the best logistics chain and everything, but suddenly for some reason that wasn't enough when other companies started to develop something intangible where they were able to create more value, creating better customer experiences. So pretty much the future of creating value is in intangible stuff. And that's why people like me who were studying in art and design schools ended up designing stuff that is intangible, things that you can't really touch. So I think we need a new breed of designers in the future to be able to tackle the design challenges that we have in the future. And those challenges are much more complex than the ones that we as designers have been working previously with. So now we have started to apply these tools and methods that we used to when we developed products, when we developed spaces, environments, all sorts of forms of design. Now we have started to use this toolbox to develop and work with materials that are materials like time, space, people, processes. And it really is quite a different ball game. And like Anna said, that no service ever exists without a customer, without the people. So it's even quite stupid to think that you could design services in the same way as you are able to craft the products. I will start by showing you this one clip from the case that we made some time ago, and it's I think it's an example that really nicely emphasizes that what the service design is about in the end, like, and what are the biggest challenges, like from the designer perspective, what you face when you start working with people. And this case is about the airport security check in Helsinki-Vantaa Airport in Finland, and sort of the design challenge here was that how to make the most painful part of the airport experience somehow a story that actually would be even valuable to customer. And like often in almost all service design cases, there is also some kind of business case almost always involved. And also in this case, when we started designing this, they told us that, you know, every minute that the customer spends in a queue, it's about 80 cents less money spent on the airport. So they told us, like, whatever you do, which is nice to the customer, so it should be smooth and should be fast, because we're going to lose lots of money if the nice things that you do will take too long time. But let's take a look at the clip.
We have 15 million guests arriving, transferring and departing. And if we think about, for example, the process while you arrive to the airport area, to the moment of boarding, only during this process there has been 11 companies serving you. And if you think about Helsinki Airport, we have more than 1,000 companies serving you. There is one touch point which certainly you have feelings about it, and actually you talk about it, but probably you don't have quite a high expectations towards it. And that touch point is security check.
Well, the big question is how to involve people in a process that is generally felt cold and unwanted. And we can make it happen only by addressing all sectors of service: people, places and processes. Processes, when designing services, you have to try and make an error. You have to try again, ask, make an error, and try again. We want to tell people what's going to happen, how they can help us to make the travel safe. You have to make sure that everyone, the passenger and the customer service people, know what is the aim. We also introduce service coaches. These people are inside the whole system, working all the time with everybody else. We want them to highlight the good things. The places are like a tip of an iceberg. That's the only thing you can see. But behind that, under the waterline, there are processes and people who are making it solid. Okay, we have the visible part now up. We want people to go through the security lane and tell us how they feel. we find that better awareness is better security.
Airports are packed with functions, people, emotions. Why we chose the service design methodology as the approach to our project is that service design puts all these together. For our it actually means that it aims for smooth traveling.
So a couple of things that Johanna mentioned here on this clip, I really want to emphasize. The other one was that the places are just the tip of an iceberg. And still, almost everything you saw in that video was the places, the physical environment. And in the end, that was by far the easiest part of the project, to design the environment where we take the customer in. But then what happens is beneath, like under the tip of the iceberg, what happens with the processes and how people work. That's something that, you know, that material is not so easy to craft. So the other point I want to emphasize from the video was that Juha mentioned the service coaches, which was really sort of a key in the project to involve people and start slowly change the way of how we do it, how we create emotions that we aim to create when we take people to this small part of their journey in the airport. Because you see from here, we have processes, environments, and actions. And actually, the airport security check as a service, it's done by 4 different companies. So actually, Finavia, who was the customer here who operates the airport, they buy this service from 4 different companies. So from their perspective, actually, the lawyers were also service designers, defining the model of how we operate the service together in the future. And for me, this was one of the first cases that I really had to dive into the world of how to, when you're working with people, as a designer, you can't really come from outside and tell people what to do. You have to involve them and get themselves to get motivated to do stuff differently. And for this particular project, we had this pilot line up for some time in the airport, and we tested there and we learned like how our training, how our materials, how the new tools, how the new environments, how they actually work to support the desired state of the service where we wanted to go. And without having this pilot, like without this learning period, probably would have been much harder to make the change that we wanted to make. And the key for understanding what works and why was the measuring. But this pretty much is my main argument today, that like no matter how much you do modeling, no matter how well you do your design on the paper and on the post-its, no service concept ever survives the first contact with customers. So sort of it's inevitable that we fail or make mistakes. So the question that I will talk about today is that how to fail successfully in order to learn faster and in order to make change happen faster. Take another example. This is the regional transport of the area of Helsinki. And they have they are quite popular among the citizens in the area. They have some services that are really good. For example, this journey planner service is almost loved by the local citizens because it helps us in our daily life quite a lot. But now this organization, they are planning a big major change, and they've been planning it for quite some time. And this change includes it affects all the customer touchpoints into traveling. So all the devices will change, all the user interfaces will change, pricing will change, ticket types will change. Basically everything will change, which actually is a huge opportunity because their aim is to get more customers from those who at the moment travel by car to become their customers, to use the public transportation more. But funnily, like this has been going on already for quite many years, preparing this project. But now with customers, It's done by professionals. And I think this is very typical case how, where does it start usually when we start developing something new? So either it starts from the business, the markets, we want to do something new, technology, now it's possible to do something, or we need to change this platform, and because of that we are redesigning the service. Or sometimes from society, which was the case in this particular project, that actually it was a political decision that they will make all these changes. And then they started to working with, like preparing it with specialists and professionals. And quite often the role of the customer is here, that the customer just adapts to all these changes. And when we were involved with this project, they searched a partner to help them to introduce service design tools and thinking into their organizations in order to sort of avoid this kind of mistakes where customers are almost neglected. But when we came there, like so many decisions had already been done. We were basically, our job now has been trying to help them to like fix what we still can fix. And this is one really funny example. You can read it through. We did some testing with the customers, quite a lot of testing with different new devices and the new pricing system and so on. And we encountered some really big problems that customers just couldn't understand why it works like this. And then we asked the professionals, like, what's the explanation? What kind of like we need some help with the information design. We need an interface that tells the customer like why it works like this, because it didn't really ring the bell to anyone. And this is the explanation we got. And we made sort of like a joke out of it. Okay, so let's put this on an official template and show it to the customers then. And this is how quite often it's done like this. Like when you are a professional, you're inside a frame. You end up thinking your problems from the inside of the organization so deep through that you totally forgot that what's the first impression to the customer. And this is, you can't really show this kind of text to anyone. If somebody understands what it means, so please tell me. Yeah. Sort of a joke. But yeah, so now we pretty much what we've been trying to do is, of course, like trying to fix what there still is to be fixed, because there's still a couple of years time to fix certain things, but many things you can't change anymore. Of course, doing lots of benchmarking, like how these problems have been fixed in other places, doing lots of different iterations with basically like information design things, how to help the customers to walk into this totally new world, new system that affects our everyday lives. And we've been having this prototyping laboratory in our office that every day lots of people come in and there's this bus stop and there's different iterations and we test and there's the iPad prototype of the machine and so on. So lots of different kind of co-design workshops and testing to learn from the spontaneous first reactions, which are really important. Like once you get into the project, you start slowly becoming a professional yourself. And you start realizing, you start understanding those complicated ways how people have thought it, but really learn from the first time experience of the customer. So my question is like, how can you possibly even think like, when you're designing stuff like this, how can you think that as a professional you can just sit on your desk and think it through and draw it and it's ready? Because for me, I think the only way really to do it is like, through the process of making as many versions and as many mistakes as possible and learning from those mistakes. And I think nowadays the design challenges that we as designers or any organization is facing nowadays is quite many of those challenges really connect to the complicated systems, almost like ecosystems. So it's not about like focused design brief that please solve this problem. It's more about, instead of doing that, it's about finding the right problem and trying to understand, holistically thinking, what are actually the challenges that we can use time and money to solve. So in a way, like, I think products and touch points, whatever you call them, those things that designers used to design before, they have sort of become like a frames. And you can almost say that whatever you design nowadays, they're somehow service connected. And sometimes you say that, sometimes you can even say that, well, like, everything you design is a service somehow. And then, of course, like, I'm not saying that in the future we will also need those designers who only design for one channel, only for the surface, only for one touch point. We need specialists also there. But there's a huge demand for a more holistic way of thinking, like really understanding, like, what's the service behind there, how can we arrange the different touch points to create seamless customer experiences. And you can call them service avatars or you can call them touch points, but you know, those together like create a story to the customer, and we can call the story an experience. But in the end, and this is really important lesson that I learned some time ago, another friend of mine who's a professor in psychology, he said to me that, Reima, think about it, like, no, people don't really want to use services. Nobody wants to use a service. We just want to live happy and meaningful lives with our loved ones. We want to, sometimes we have aims and goals and we want to get stuff done, but we don't want to use services. Like, nobody wants to use an online banking service. We just want to, you know, take care of our financial matters in a way that makes us happy. But organizations quite often, they only think like, we have this service and we want people to use our service. But instead of that, it's like the needs and goals people have in their everyday lives. And we should think like, how can we help people to achieve those needs and goals that they are having? So how can we address them in a meaningful way? And then it comes to this quote that is sort of my favorite quote, that it really tells that the more the complex the challenges get, the more important this way of thinking also gets. So basically the worst thing to do is use time, money and resources to solve totally wrong kind of problems. And which is even worse is to do it over and over again and expect different results. And I see companies doing that all the time. They are trying to solve the wrong problem all over and over again, thinking that, yeah, well, maybe we made the solution in a wrong way, instead of really asking, like, is this the problem worth solving, or should we solve some totally another problem in order to really help our customers to achieve what they want to achieve? And I think it sort of comes from the research and development history that, at least in Finland, is really product-centric and is really sort of like a solution-centric. And I think when we are entering the era of customer value and services, the R&D also, it's supposed to be problem-centric, not solution-centric. So the right problem becomes more and more important. So service design is not about like being a creative designer that has like hundreds of nice concept ideas. It's more about really diving deep into the experience of the customer and finding the right problems that are worth solving. And you know, with products and tangible stuff, the risk is lower to solve wrong problems because services are such loose systems that you can't really standardize in a way that you can standardize products. So this risk becomes even bigger. So I often tell people that please don't sell or buy service design. It doesn't help anything. It's like you can do that in a good way or a bad way. It's more about finding and solving the right problems. And how do you find the right problems? When you think about services, I think, like, based on my experience, the only possible way to find the right problems is start from the customer. That's the reason why the organizations exist in the first place. Like, why would they exist if they don't have their customers? But it's funny that at the same time, usually when they start to think about like what we need to do, it doesn't start from the customer, it starts from somewhere else. And quite easily when you are sitting in your office, You get so distant about who your customers actually are and where they are and what do they want to achieve in their daily lives. And almost all organizations that I work with, in their strategy, there is this holy line that one of our main principles is that we are customer-centric. But that doesn't really mean anything in practice. If you say it like that, it's only a buzzword. But it came to me one day that actually, like, if you ask why instead of what should we do or how should we do it, if you ask why we are doing it, then you're automatically customer-centric. Because then you really have to think that who is this person or organization that I'm going to help and how. And it's also the key of finding the right problems to solve. But like I said earlier, it's quite easy for organizations to forget this why question. It's more about when we are hired to work in an organizations, we go there because we think they hire us because we are professionals or specialists in some field. And then we think that because we are specialists in this field, we don't need to ask the why question. We can only ask ourselves, how do we do it and what we are going to do. Because we should have the skills to know it. But for example, in this case of public transportations, we asked them that why on earth didn't you work with customers when you started this? Because you might have had so good ideas how to get people actually to use the public transportation more, since you are making all the big changes. So why didn't you start working with customers? And they said, but well, yeah, we are specialists, and at the same time we are also all customers of these services. Which in a way it's true, but when you are inside the frame, it's really hard to see it from the outside. So I think like professionalism sometimes is really dangerous. Whether it's a professionalism in whether you are a civil servant or an engineer or even a designer. Even saying I'm a professional service designer who is great in doing co-design, that's also really dangerous. Because then you end up forgetting the why question. So I think also the times have come to sort of like race of generalists instead of specialists. But it's hard for our professional identity, because if I say to myself that, yeah, I'm doing this design in a way that I work with customers and sort of like the ideas come from the customers or the service personnel, and then I just facilitate the process, it can feel that, okay, will they need me anymore in the future if I don't have any good ideas of my own, if the all ideas come from the customers? So am I a bad designer in a way? And I see this a lot, like when I talk with my colleagues, they sort of like, because traditionally designers should have all the fancy ideas and then just somebody should implement those ideas. And in a way, now all these wicked problems that we are facing, the economies, people getting older, healthcare, global warming, diminishing resources, everything, they are all affecting organizations, both on the micro and macro level. And we really need radical innovation instead of just making the corners a bit more round. But I think one thing that really blocks the radical innovation is that there's too much specialism in the organizations. And usually those specialists are also the people who in the first place tell you why things cannot be done, because for some reason they happen to have the knowledge that we tried it before and it didn't work, or it's the way of showing that I'm a specialist so I can tell you why your idea doesn't work. So there's, in that way, there's too many devil's advocates in organizations who are preventing the radical innovation to happen. This is probably a very familiar picture to all of you who work in some kind of organization, because this is the way organizations are nowadays. They are structured this way to do development and innovation. So people are sitting in their own boxes, in their silos. They are doing the design and development in those silos. and they don't even have the same language to talk about the customer. And at the same time, they are designing touch points, new concepts, new models that together create the experience to the customer. My background is in film, so I always love to talk about storytelling, and I often compare customer experience to a good movie. So you can imagine if movies were made like this, that different people in different silos would make the different parts of the movie without even having the common language about the persons who are going to watch the movie. But with services, this is reality that happens almost in all organizations. And it's because those silos, they have their own goals. Sometimes they compete with each other. They are measuring on the short term what they are doing. And they are, all the time, they are looking at their customers through their existing offering. So it's really hard to come up with anything radical if you're always, the existing offering is here in between as a sort of lens, which leads only to incremental innovation. And sometimes I'm really amazed how powerful it can be to bring one comment from a real customer up to the boardroom. And suddenly all the directors realize that, okay, instead of asking what to do, we should maybe ask why we are actually doing this. Just quickly, a couple of personal learnings from a project that we did already quite some time ago, but I think it's really an interesting project that learned me a lot, that it's sometimes quite different on the books and in practice. This is a nice case that we got the chance to do, to redesign the way people do their bathroom renovations and buy new bathtubs and all the stuff that goes on the floor and the ceilings and so on. So basically it could have been an interior design project for a retail environment, but it was a service design project, and we started it in a very traditional way, like how you do it in the books. You do research, then you do analysis, then you do co-design with the staff, with the customers. And it took quite a long time before we actually were able to make our first pilot. But now when I look back to this project, the learning and the design really started when we started the first pilot. Then we realized that even though if we had about 20, 30 different new concepts that they implemented to the store, which were supposed to help the salespeople to become familiar with the new model of selling these bathroom renovations, and also supposed to create better customer experience. Even though we had those ideas, then suddenly when we started to pilot, we realized that most of these, they are not working for some reason. Either it's bad implementation, or it's quite many of those didn't work because actually the salespersons, they felt like, okay, I don't want to use this. I don't want to use it that way. And we were like, yeah, but we think it's a good idea since we designed it, and we designed it because of this and this and this. And actually, the big turning point was that when one of the salespersons that actually was most against this new concept, when she realized that actually these new tools, this new way of working, it makes me a better salesperson. And then she started preaching it to others. And suddenly it was all clear. But for me, it was like a really big learning. We should have started all the way from the beginning with the sales persons. It's not like we as designers do the research and then come up with concept ideas. We should have worked together with them. How can we even thought that we have better ideas that they have? And it's also the ownership of the ideas. With service design, the designer cannot have the ownership for the ideas. It's it doesn't matter who invents the ideas. It's more like what works and why. So for me, it was a even though results were extremely good in the end, but when I look back to it, it took 1.5 years. We could have done it in 3 months if we had done it in a way that we started working right away at the front stage without doing all the heavy research part. We could have done the same research, but we could have done it with the people. So good ideas don't usually work in practice, and this is why I think we really need to learn to design for incomplete stuff. And for designers, that's quite hard because we are taught to design complete, solid concepts. So how can we learn to design incomplete and make more mistakes? Because failing actually is now very fun, but you can learn quite a lot from it. So after that case that I talked to you about, I draw this other kind of process instead of having this official service design process. It was more like, yeah, we should just start experimenting and try to make those mistakes, even on purpose, and I try to learn them and involve people all the time. And by working that way, first find the right problems. And then when you find the right problems, you don't really have to spend time for ideation anymore. The solution is almost always contained in a problem. So when you find the problem, the solution is there already. So it's after that, like the being creative has become, for me, much more easier. When you spend time finding the problems, then you already have the solutions. And another learning that actually, when we talk about designing services, there shouldn't be any other design than co-design. So I don't know if you even need to talk about co-design, because all that you do should be co-design and working together with people. But of course, like, I know that if you haven't worked this way, it can sound pretty hard. Like, how can people know what they want? And usually they don't know. You can't really think that they are designers who come up with the ready-made ideas. And please, I have this wonderful idea, like, implement this to me, please. It never happens like that. It's more like, and I'm happy it's that way because I still have a work to do some kind of facilitation in the process at least. But it can be really frustrating and time-consuming if you don't have the framework for facilitating the co-design, how to work together with people to achieve certain goals that actually match the design brief, how to find the right problems, working together with people. It can be really frustrating if it comes a noise and shouting and everybody doing something. But that's the thing, you should never start with the blank paper. So when you work with customers, you should always have these what-if scenarios and ideas that you can show to people. And I think that's the work that designers are pretty good at, like quickly sketching up ideas and thinking with our hands and showing those ideas to customers. And what if you see something like this? How would you behave in a situation like that? We did last summer 2 trips on these cruise boats that sail between Finland and Sweden. And those 2 trips, we spent the whole time designing together with customers and with service personnel. And it was an amazing amount of stuff that we get done. And it felt like that they got really excited because, you know, it wasn't like it's these designers who come here with their ideas. It was more like we came there to to listen to their ideas, to provocate them, to sort of like have a structured conversation that ended up in the visualizations of their ideas instead of our ideas. And certainly suddenly you have when those people have the ownership for the ideas, then they start automatically thinking like how can we test this idea really fast? How can we start to implement it? But if you come from as an outsider, as a designer, and with your flag that I have this great idea, it doesn't stick. So that's also another big learning from me, that if you want to make the change happen fast, you have to have the people get the people self-motivated for the change and get the feeling to them that it's their ideas, not the designer's fancy ideas. One more last thing. This is sort of just summarizing the things that I'm talking about, because I think that really too much service design is done on the backstage, in the meeting rooms and workshops and wherever. So instead of that, we should just get out on the front stage and start working there, doing our research and doing our design there. Give power to the people, test our ideas much faster. These are both retail cases. The other one is from a supermarket, where actually these folks here, they are having their every Monday meeting, where they are together listing the things that they will try out during this week. And they are discussing, like the last week, what of those trials that they made, which worked and why, gathering the learnings from those and based on those learnings, developing new ideas. And for us, it's like we only made this thing here and the ways to measure it. Now it's the employees who are doing the design, who are developing all the time new trials that they can make there. And they only have two key things that they measure, which is the average purchase and the willingness to recommend. And everything, like they learn based on what they do. And the other case was a really nice case that one of the clients that we have, they gave us a shop for a month, and they said, do whatever you like. And hardly ever you get that kind of chance. But it really accelerated the design process, because we were able to test many things. And this particular picture is about one concept idea that for example, I really liked the idea, and the customers in the interviews, they thought, yeah, it's a good idea. I would probably buy that bag with the recipe, with all the ingredients ready there. But guess how many of those bags were sold in real life? Only 2. So a good idea in an interview, like in theory, a really good idea, but people just didn't work like that. And for me, like first it bit hurt, because I felt, yes, damn, it was almost like my own idea, and I was really excited about it. It didn't work, but then I realized that, okay, this is really interesting. It didn't work, so what can I learn from it? Because it's a really revealing point to really understand how people really behave in a real environment. So in a way, when the money changes the owner, that's the ultimate test, at least if you talk about the retail. So in the Touchpoint, which is a journal for Service Design Network, there's an article we wrote about our way of doing this kind of co-design. If you want to know more, you can read it. And one more thing I will say about measuring. Don't have time to talk about the case, but I will make the conclusion about it. Like, when you are doing those trials and testing in a live environment, if you are not measuring, since the services are intangible, if you are not measuring, you don't really know what affects what and why. So you really need to measure on all levels to understand the correlations between different actions. So if you don't measure, you are basically doing design blindfolded, which is of course not good. So I would say experimenting, not guessing, because so much guessing is done when developing new things is done. And in the end, like no service concept survives its first contact with people. So I end up with this. It's from Tim Brown and IDEO. And it was a really nice summary of how the model of design has changed during the past years. So we used to design for people, sort of like using applied ethnography and other tools. Then we used to do this co-creation, designing together with people. But now more and more, we as designers of services, we are coming just by facilitators. We are designing by people, creating a setting where people themselves can realize their goals and get motivated to change. So we're just merely becoming facilitators. But that's the only way really to change the culture, because you can't change the culture from the outside. Thank you.